Welcome to the Defiance Daily Show. We're here with our guest, Dale Inman. Is that right?
Hey, Pastor Inman, how are you today,
Pastor
sir?
Inman, go ahead and
Fantastic.
introduce yourself. Tell us your name. Tell us your background. What are you doing here with these
how
two
did you find
disgruntled
us?
gentlemen?
Well, through a series of unfortunate incidences, I find myself in this seat today.
Hey, that's the hot seat.
The hot seat. You told me it wasn't the hot seat. Now, what is the hot seat?
That
Wasn't
is
it warm
not
when
a
you?
hot seat.
That is
Not
not a
recording.
hot.
It's not the hot seat. As
That
soon as
is
they're
not a
recording,
hot
we're on the hot seat.
Where are you a pastor at, Pastor Dale?
I currently pastor the Woodlands Bible Church in the Woodlands, Texas. I've been there just over a year. Total pastoring probably about 15 to 18 years, somewhere in there. I was one of the first 100 agents in Texas with nationwide insurance, and built up an agency, and then sold that about 10 years ago and retired.
Oh, okay. And then you got involved with politics a little bit too, because I've served with you in the Montgomery County political spectrum.
Yes, in about 2000, I started getting involved. A little bit maybe prior to that, my wife's father, my father-in-law, was a district judge, and I had helped him stuff on his campaign. I didn't really call that as being involved in politics, helping a family member with his district campaigns, district judge campaigns. But in about 02, 03, 04 is where I kind of got really more plugged in. And so pretty much just over 20 years now, I've been very active politically in this Montgomery County area.
Democrat or Republican Party?
We host all creeds and colors here, man. Don't
Hey,
be ashamed.
Listen,
Don't
it's
be
220.
ashamed.
It's 2025.
Where I come from, those are fighting words, sir.
Obviously, you are a proud member, not just a Republican, but you are a rhino hunter, and that title does not get bestowed very easily. We've had John Boucher in that seat as well as Steve Toth, and so you are very, very conservative, traditional. Obviously, what are some of the elected positions that you've held or are currently holding?
Currently, I'm on the State Republican Executive Committee for Senate District 4, which is basically Montgomery County. If you drew like a diagonal box kind of down towards Bolivar, it's on the north side of Galveston County, not Galveston Island, but Bolivar. That's that district there. The 31 districts in Texas. I'm the committee man for SD4, Senate District 4, which, as you probably saw just as recently as yesterday, was Brandon Creighton's district. He has vacated that, I think, yesterday now to Chancellor Texas Tech.
Yeah, he's up at Texas Tech, right?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
he's
sir.
already getting rid of all the DEI commies.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that going on. So we wish him the very best. And then I'm, of course, a precinct chair here in Montgomery County. I was on the school board, Conroe ISD school board, about 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's interesting how about 6, 7, 8 years ago, I had said, we're losing our next generation to liberal nonsense. Gobbledygook is the official word. But it's in our schools. You get a kid going off to school and they come out and they're a completely different person than when they went in, and not different for the better, but for the worse.
And we're not even talking about just ideologically, like physically. A lot of these people are coming back looking like they did years of methamphetamine on
For sure,
end.
absolutely, yeah. And so I was on the school board, and I'm proud to report we've completely flipped that board around. And I've been invited to Orange County, Collin County, Denton, Dallas, Bexar County. Several counties around Texas have called me, and I've gone over and spoken to their people that were involved in the school boards on how to reshape the school board and bring in conservatives and how to win elections. So that kind of really was a big step probably about 6, 7, 8 years ago. And then, more recently, I usually do the Senate 4 district conventions, the district conventions, and then 2 years ago at state convention, I was the chair for the state convention. And I'm currently the chairman of election integrity in Texas. Abraham George appointed me to that position probably about 4 or 5 months ago.
How are you liking that?
A lot of election irregularities that I'm looking into.
Yeah, you seeing some unnamed documents or documented immigrants on these voter rolls?
It blows my mind how you'll tell people that there's election fraud. They'll swear there's not. You show them evidence. Okay, it's not that much. You show them more evidence. Okay, it's a lot, but it doesn't matter. The story always progresses from where their position is. It doesn't happen at all.
Well, and especially when it's favoring their party, right?
Correct,
I mean,
absolutely.
we're in this predicament now where, Democrats are trying to claim that they do not give health care benefits to illegal immigrants. I mean, they're basically gaslighting the public, and pretty good strategic move because we're seeing now that obviously that's not the case. There's whole states running these programs. We just covered how annually Illinois alone over $2 billion just to those states' taxpayers. That's insane. So yeah, as far as voter irregularities and them getting IDs, this used to be about just helping out people, but now it's turning to a voting block. They don't really hide that fact anymore, do they?
Not at all. I don't like when people are purposefully duplicitous, and when they say we don't give money to illegals. If you splice that out some, technically they don't. They give it to the
Oh,
states.
we just talked about this. Yes.
They give it to the illegals, and they know where that money goes. So like, we don't give it to them, but they don't continue with it's the state that does it. It's not us.
Right.
So, but again, I do not like when people are willfully duplicitous. And often I tell people, I say, there was a guy on the school board a while ago, Mark, your buddy, Datron Williams, I think. And I remember one time in a meeting, he's a big Democrat, saying how great the Democrat policies are. And I said, what city in America run by Democrats works well? I'm originally from Southside Chicago. We came to Texas because we didn't want to live in Democrat-controlled areas. And he said that policy has no bearing on the outcome of an area.
You gotta be.
Who's in charge has no bearing. And I said, you're either willfully lying to me, or you're so stupid we cannot continue this conversation. I don't have a lot of conversations with people that are openly lying or that's stupid. And I don't like to use that word, haphazardly, but I said, and I told myself, if there's a third option, what is it? Is there another option why you think that policy doesn't dictate how the people live? But I do see so many Democrats moving into here and then the voting like the place they left. And it's like, why do you think it's going to get better when you vote for the same stuff you left from?
Yeah, and you can make the argument. We are definitely seeing it here in Texas. I mean,
was
you
my
talk
buddy.
about policy effect and outcome. Look at the Ukrainian gal that got stabbed on the bus. What was that? Irina. That was 39 convictions previously. Convictions.
Yeah.
And he was let out. So that's
It's horrific.
what's that called? Horse hockey. I mean, we know the game now. We know the game now. So I like to think that a lot of the talking points, they're not as effective anymore because we're seeing younger generations, especially, we're seeing it on social media, and especially after this whole deal with Charlie Kirk, people are flooding this content to see about this Nazi and folks like us that are Nazis over here, this whole Nazi collaboration in this studio right now. Now people are tuning into it and they're going, why are they calling these guys Nazis? And I think we're seeing the ripple effects of all that. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree exactly. For years, I used to tell people that if the moment someone says you're a racist or homophobe or bigot or whatever, that was my key to I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Because when they go to the name calling, ad hominem attacks, it says they have no more facts to argue the point, so they have to argue the messenger. They can't argue the message anymore. So the moment the names come out, I was like, hey, I'm onto something. I use it like gasoline to keep going. So many people over the years, especially in the last 20, I'm glad to see more people are stepping up now because I saw so many people, oh, I don't want to be called a name. It's like, but they silence you into shame. Wear the shame proudly. I had someone say, well, you're a Christian nationalist. And a few months ago, I put on my Facebook or social media post, I said, I love Christ and I love my nation. I guess that makes me a Christian national, and I'm proud of that.
Oh, so that has been, I want to speak to that for a second because that's been talked about in the media in the term Christian nationalist, like it's this god-awful thing. How in the hell is a Christian nationalist a bad thing?
Exactly right. It basically says if you love Christ and you love your nation, you're a problem. You're a threat to this country. And I think it's just absolutely preposterous on a completely separate issue. Maybe we do a show on this sometime. We can't let the left control language because the problem is whoever controls language controls the narrative, and who controls narrative controls the culture. And that's a more of a philosophical kind of statement, I guess. But
So words mean things?
words mean things. But if you I'm the tender age of 60, none of your business, younger than Mark Pruitt, though I'd like to add.
No.
I just determined that a moment ago. But when I grew up, you said the word family, man, woman, father, husband. Those had very specific meanings. Now, literally, we have Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Smith cannot define what a woman is. And I said this years ago. I said, how did we make language get so well? And I'll tell you, and I don't know what your complete background is, but chaos is caused by a certain kingdom. I always say when I preach, there's two kingdoms: God's kingdom and the kingdom of this world. God's kingdom is run by him. This kingdom is run by the devil. The devil causes chaos. So whenever you're in a situation where there's chaos and confusion, know that the devil's in it somewhere. God is not a God of chaos. He's a God of orderliness. And so, again, that's more kind of a separate philosophical discussion, I suppose. But I always go even way back to the Garden of Eden when God said, don't eat of this tree. And Satan said, did God really say? Well, right there's where the two
there it
narratives
is.
came out of.
Yep.
Which are you going to believe? But if there's chaos, if kids are going to school and coming out worse than they went in, realize who's running that system.
Should we be surprised by that? When you say the system, I'm assuming you're talking about public schools. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. And I think, Mark, you said a year or so ago, and I've heard it said elsewhere, don't be surprised if you send your kids to Caesar for an education, they come back thinking like a Roman.
I was quoting Vody Bachman.
Okay, yeah. I know you had said that, and it
Yeah.
stuck with me, and then I looked it up one time, and I saw it was...
And it's true. I mean, I think parents are naive at best, or complicit in child abuse at worst when they send their children to Caesar to be educated and raised and fed and everything else. And I don't understand where that came from or why we become so complacent with the idea of doing that. But we've got a real problem in this country, and we're shocked when these kids come out and they're medicated. They're psychologically affected in a very negative way. Spiritually, they're lost. They've been fed things like evolution and, pro-humanism type topics, and they're being, educated and formed by most time by females that have been propagated in college universities, and so we wonder why our young, why there's so many issues today. Should we be surprised by any of this?
I think once you have peeled the curtain back a little bit and looked behind this curtain, no. My heart goes for those parents that are so busy trying to pay the tax burdens of Caesar, where dad's working, mom's working, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They bought into the belief you got to get a new car every 2 years and go on vacations.
And that's their fault.
I agree, but they thought they were... Every generation since George Washington has given their children a better future, except this one. This is the first one we're going the wrong way. And I think people just had that cultural mindset of things will always be better tomorrow. So they went down that road, and now they're there. And I'm kind of a person more inclined to how can we help make a roadmap of how to get you to where you want to be with the constraints that you have on you. And if you're deep in debt, you might have to have mom and dad keep working to get out because it's honorable to pay your debts. But then what do we do with these kids? Now, Mark, I don't know if you know this, but we just recently are hosting a STEM school at our church.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
I think it's up to the church.
Yeah, we're having a movie night. The first Friday of the month, we do a family movie night at the church. And we bring in snacks and pizza and just all the stuff like a movie. And we have a big 150-inch screen TV or movie projector, and we project it. And but I say we have to have alternatives. The church has to have alternative to what Rome has. And so I'm kind of in that phase right now of looking what can we do to help those families that are in crisis. And I would call it right now, if you got, I'm certainly not going to mention names. I know 3 or 4 families right now that are in crisis mode, losing their children to drugs or, I didn't know we'd be talking about this. I thought we were going to go a completely different direction with the show today. But I've got a picture that haunts me. There's 8 kids in that picture. And I've known some of them since they were 3 and 4. Now they're probably 24, 25. Of those 8, what I'll call children, 4 or 5 are dead.
Oh my God.
And 3 or 4 are in prison or have been in prison. And I said, I've known these kids their whole lives. I've done 3 or 4 of their funerals, and it is traumatic to say, what in the world happened to this generation?
That's a, it's interesting to talk about these points too, because they do all relate. I mean, we have the belief here, these are intergenerational agendas. This takes long-term planning to get to the point that we're at societally. It's not by accident. It's not some grassroots thing that's just coming down the pike. It is the hand of Satan. It is the labor-intensive efforts to get these structures around us. And now where you're seeing what you just mentioned right there, which is basically the cohesiveness of any civilization is rapidly being destroyed, where you're separating. You basically got the wife and the husband separated, the mother and the father separated. The kids are now being raised by the state. And you culminate that with the entertainment culture, the self-degradation, the addictions, the drugs, the pornography, and everything else in between. Yeah, we are seeing the fruits of that labor right now, are we not?
That's exactly right. It is, the Bible is very clear that you will reap what you sow. And those seeds of free will, and if it feels good, do it, and all that mentality of human secularism. Mark, you said a moment ago about something you said about the schools, and made me think of human secularism. Basically, is if it feels good, do it, and that's what kids are taught.
It. Yep.
And they don't have the life experience to draw from, and unfortunately, so many of them don't have a dad at home that straightens them out. I think this. I used to use a word called toxic femininity. I've changed that colloquialism, or that phrase I've used, to toxic feminism.
Yeah.
Because it's not that femininity is toxic.
No, right.
But there is a toxic feminism movement that is, I think, plays a big hand in, as you were just saying.
Which is
these
anything
kids
but
that are turning
feminine.
out.
It's anything but feminism. When you really look at the tenets of the feminism movement. Or it's anything but femininity.
Exactly
The opposite of
Yeah,
that.
the opposite of that, but glorifying it and making it packaged in a kind of a civil rights-esque type of platform. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Well, it didn't get here overnight. What?
True.
And we've got Lily Kate coming in here in a couple of weeks. That's going to be we're going to be interviewing, and we can't wait to have her. She's amazing. And I think when I reached out to you originally, Dale, we were talking about, and we've had interactions about this, because I think we're seeing the perfect storm, a culmination of public education, the feminist movement, and then both of those collided with the civil rights movement of the 1960s, which has landed us now where we're at today, and it's a complete disaster, and it's a meltdown. But this didn't happen today. This started just barely before the Civil War, or the War of Northern Aggression, as I call it, to right after the Civil War. It's when the feminist movement and the public education movement started. And you mix that in with, and I think there's, and I was hoping you could maybe shed some light, because I've been studying the spirit of Jezebel.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with any of that, Pastor Z? And then its effect on the communists used the feminist movement to get us to where we're at today, and how that all started. Or do you know much about the origins of that?
Yeah, you had said it started right after the Civil War in about the late 1840s. So prior to the Civil War by a few years, there was a convention at Seneca Falls. I think it was called the Seneca Falls Convention.
Yes, the Seneca Falls Convention.
And they had something called a Doctrine of Sentiments. I can't remember the exact phrase, but there was 15 articles they put out. It was like a woman's Bill of Rights, which I find odd. Often I'm very hesitant when I see someone say like a welder's Bill of Rights. It's like, well, shouldn't rights apply to everyone equally? If you have a Bill of Rights for just you're mentioning the group that these rights apply to, it sounds like you're excluding then other people. But anyway, neither to say, I think we would all agree, at least I will, and I believe both you gentlemen would as well. I'm 100% that women have the right to vote, women have the right to work, women have all these rights. But you hit the nail on the head, Mark, a second ago when you said there's these waves of feminism. I think the first one, most people, I think, today would probably, by and large, agree with. I've got two grandmothers, a mom, a wife, two daughters. I've got a lot of women that I want them to have opportunities to play soccer, and I spend a lot of time in the Middle East. as you know, and I see how women are treated in the Middle East versus here. I would not want my daughters or my mom treated that way. There should be a dignity that women are afforded in our Western democracy or our republic that we have here in the United States. But they went from, we want equal rights, and I see this, and I think you guys will agree with this. We want equal rights to we want superior rights.
Yeah.
And they crossed that line of we want equality to we want preferential. And I think that's where the feminism movement is today. And I could even mention some things in the political world right here in our county that I've always, for years I've said I don't think that's right. For example, let me ask you guys, and I don't mean to put you in the hot seat. Let's say there's some women's clubs here in the county that says you have to be a woman to be a member, you have to be a woman to be on the ballot, to be an officer. Simply by the rule, if you're a man, you're excluded. Could you imagine if a men's club did that today?
Go ahead, Travis, and I'll.
Yeah,
I mean,
stop there.
it would. I mean, this goes in line with the all that group out. I forget where, but they got all this flack because they were starting this white community and they were looking at it as
up in Arkansas.
Up in Arkansas. And, every other group can do this, but there's certain groups that are not allowed to. And yes, man, would be one of them. That would cause a freak out. And I think you guys are alluding to the kind of the third wave feminism, the militant arm of this, where, yeah, we did initially, where it was talking about rights and certain duties and everything. And it came to a superiority type of platform. We don't need men. We don't need, they've had their chance. It's basically, we're going to come in and dominate. And you're seeing this reflected in different elements. So a good example is this, in tandem with the public education and what we're seeing on social media, you're talking about the entertainment culture. So we watched we like the apocalyptic kind of shows. There was one called The Last of Us that we started, and my wife warned me. She said, why didn't we ever start the show before? I said, usually they all got the woke stuff in it, but usually I catch it. But this one was out of control. Every single episode. And now, to someone like my wife, who's been apolitical most of her life, she never heard of any of this stuff. But by being with me and me pointing out things that we were going to see, for example, in a movie show before it happened, made her even more opposed. So I think it is good if, you're around people who maybe aren't aware of this and you kind of leave the breadcrumbs a little bit. Yeah, and in the show, we're sitting there making fun of it. It's like every leader is a woman.
Oh, yeah.
The men are stupid. The women are the heroes. They're saving the men in the show. Mm-hmm. In an apocalyptic world where, we kind of look at each other and she's like, that would never happen in the real world. Apocalyptic world, it's... People don't understand.
Right.
Things get that bad, you need men on your side. You need good men on your side, good moral men, because the world is filled with evil. But yeah, we somehow have gotten away with that as if, it's we don't need the men here, and as if, men didn't have a specific hand in creating this civilized world we like to live in. I like the way Ben Shapiro put this on an argument on, I think this was on Bill Maher. All the people who are atheists and people that think we're backwards in a lot of ways, they're starting their moral sense of aptitude on third base. They're already born in a culture that was created by the exact type of men that we're talking about. So for people that don't believe in this kind of thing, which I'm not attacking anybody there, but I'm just saying, yeah, you grew up in a time that was a millionfold better than your ancestors did. And it took a lot to get to this point here. And taking it for granted is also part of this issue.
I'll answer your question. There was a time when I didn't know what I was doing, and I was definitely hadn't become a man yet or whatever, but I think your question was, what would you do if there were some political groups or whatever, there were women only? Knowing what I know now, first of all, my wife would not participate in that. I don't think that it's a good environment when women like that get together, minus their husbands, because I think that's where a lot of confusion and a lot of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but women get together and it ends up being one of these things where they're talking bad about their husbands, and not good positive things come out of those usually. And so yeah, I just wouldn't. My wife wouldn't be allowed to participate in things like that. I don't know if that's controversial or not, though, Pastor. I'm not sure.
I don't think it's controversial. I think I think what you said a moment ago about in that movie, The Last of Us, is that the one where they turn into plants or something?
No, The Last of Us is a TV series where they don't turn it. Well, I get kind of the fungus. They turn
Yeah, it's a
into.
fungus,
They
yeah.
get a. It's not a viral
They were
disease.
in,
It's
Game
a
of
fungus.
Thrones, the
Yep,
Diana
Pedro
girl.
Pascal and the little girl who was.
I missed that one.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well, I know that. It's funny you say that because about whenever the last Star Wars came out, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, whenever that one was, we went and saw that. And I told my wife at the end of the movie, I said, "You know what's interesting? The Jedi is now a woman. All the leaders of the 3 different factions were women. So what you guys were just saying, I noticed that about 8, 9, 10 years ago, and then just yesterday I was talking to someone at church, and they were saying the new James Bond's a woman, and the Karate Kid." And it's slowly, and I grew up with Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, My 3 Sons, The Brady Bunch. The dad was the stable, solid, wise.
The leader.
And now it's Homer Simpson or
Oh,
even
yeah.
Tim Allen on Tool Time. I was trying to think, when's the last show you saw a sitcom of a traditional nuclear family? And I said, I think it might have been Tool Time, but even in that one, Tim is the goofy oddball,
Yep.
and the mom's the glue in the family.
Bingo.
And so earlier, one of you alluded to something that's been going on for a decade or so, where you don't notice it at first, but now it's like the water's boiling and the thermometer is broken at 212, and you see it and you feel you're boiling. You're like, hey, now I see everything. So I think a lot of people are, and I especially like this younger generation, the alphas and some of the late Z generation, that you might be aware, I'm sure you are, that they actually voted more conservative than the X and Y generation.
Yes.
So yeah, this
I
goes.
think their eyes are being opened up to stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it I know because there's some entertainment value. I get it in the conspiracy realm, I'll call it. So growing up, I grew up listening to Alex Jones. Nobody wanted anything to do with Alex Jones. I mean, he was just, you couldn't touch him in any of the topics. And him being attacked the way he was drew more people over time over to what exactly he's saying, because now people are, why is everybody talking? I've never heard of this guy or anything. We're seeing the similar type of activity with Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk, after he was assassinated, people were celebrating it. People were calling him Nazis, saying he was racist. Well, now we've noticed this. I mean, I don't know how to put it into metrics, but we've run analytics on this, and people are flooding Charlie Kirk's content now. What all that does is open up more people to really question it. It goes into politics eventually, because at one point with me, you can go down all kinds of rabbit holes, and I went down plenty that turned out to be absolutely false. And matter of fact, I think some of them were intentionally put out there to steer off of legitimate questions about official narratives that were given. But people are now going to Charlie Kirk's video and going, this guy isn't why are they lying so hard about it? And that was a question I wanted to ask you, Pastor, is after that incident, have you seen an uptick in curiosity, people coming to church? What have been your personal observations for a legendary character like Charlie Kirk that really did practice what he preached?
I think you're exactly right. I've seen an uptick in, I would say, quantity of people involved. I was in I'm tangentially associated in a mediation issue with some lawyers out of Minnesota as a witness to something. I'm on the witness side of that. But we were in a Zoom call the other day, and when the mediator left the room, went out and was talking to the other side and back and forth. Anyway, there was a lady on the Zoom call. We were just chatting. She's from Minnesota. I'm going to guess she's probably late 50s. And she had said something about what's going on. I said, well, the other night we had a Charlie Kirk thing here in our county. She goes, oh, Charlie Kirk, I've been hearing about him. And like I said, she's probably late 50s. And she said, I've never heard of him until about a week or two ago. I cannot watch enough of his content. She said, I'll turn it on. I have to go to work. I'll have in the background another computer. He is so spot on and accurate in what he's saying. The moment he says something, I hear the truth in it, and I am able to compartmentalize. And she goes, I'm like, how can I have never heard of this person? So to your point, that kind of caught me off guard. How could you not have heard of Charlie Kirk? But I've heard several people say, I've heard about him, didn't know much, but now that I'm watching his videos, I bet I've heard that in excess of 50 times. I wouldn't say 100, but I'll say several times a week, several times a day maybe even, where people say, I put Charlie Kirk on and just watch all of his content. And I think that's going to be corroborated with national metrics analysis of when they see how many hits his videos are getting and his YouTube channel and all the different stuff he puts out. I know I've bought 2 of his books since the assassination. And I said, I need to know more about this. And he was definitely a strong, positive force, kind of back to exactly what we're talking about. It's kind of pushing back traditional roles of male and female roles. And I do think there are traditional roles. I want to be clear. Again, I'm going to be very clear. Men are not superior to women. They're different than women. And I find it bizarre that in 2025 we have to make a statement like that men and women are different.
Yeah, like we have basic different roles. I mean, it's very simple
But
stuff.
I tell people if I used to build houses. I'm building my wife a house now at our farm, and I say I do a lot of the work myself. But I've said, who's better, a plumber or an electrician? Well, it depends on the problem.
There you go.
It's not. I don't compare. They're different. They're different roles between an electrician and a plumber. And I say that with men and women. There's different roles with men and women. If someone says who's better, now I will tell you unequivocally, to raise solid, young, godly, patriotic men, you need a father.
Yeah.
There may be some aberration in the numbers of women that do that, but overwhelmingly, if you don't have a strong dad raising strong sons, your society will fall apart. Because strong societies are made up of strong families. You destroy the family, you destroy the society or the nation.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that, obviously, because whenever you have a family, you don't let anybody get between you and your family. So there's been generations, obviously, that have been maneuvered, manipulated, trained that we don't need each other. And the state has now gone directly. They have direct access to kids now where they used to not. They have direct access to the females to the point where, if you can rely on the state, that can be your husband now. And so it's steered away from the traditional roles for sure, but it's also steered away from our own ability to protect ourselves, which is a shocking thing to say out loud. But the cohesion between men, women, and a family unit, that has been actively pursued. And I don't want to say destroy yet, because I do have a lot of hope for my generation, the generation behind me, that they are seeing this, that it is very obvious. It's very obvious when you turn on entertainment programs or you're seeing it. I've heard people have sent me stuff about things in video games even, where this stuff is happening. So it's a concerted effort, and I think people are more open to the possibility of the intentionality of it, because I think that's important too. This isn't a natural progression. We're not just bumbling through history and things are just popping out of the grassroots. These are long-term agendas, and I think one of the best examples we covered here, if you look at Dr. John Money and Alfred Kinsey. Mm-hmm. You want to know the modern-day priesthood, that's it right there. And it's anything but a priesthood. I mean priesthood in the sense of absolute, outright, without even saying it, worship of the devil and the devil's hand and everything awful in those studies that are used to justify where we're at today.
Yeah, that Kinsey report that came out, I'm not even going to mention it, but if some of your viewers or you want to research some of the reports he had of like 6-month-old male child and their ability to climax, and
unfortunately
how did they find that out?
Well, and unfortunately we did. I would say I forget when we did that
You
show,
can't
but
even speak at what they did.
well, and we covered it. So there's a belief here, and we'll dedicate certain shows specific to this because people do need to understand the horror that's involved in the world that we're dealing with. These ideologies and where they're coming from. A lot of them came out of that book. Alfred Money or John Money was a disciple of Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey was a big believer. Who was it? Aleister Crowley. I mean, a lot of these occultist type of people and these insane practices. But yes, we go so far. I would recommend people to go back and check out that segment of the show. We dedicated 2 episodes to Alfred Kinsey and John Money and the studies. And yes, what he's alluding to there is the table and the timing. And we even go through the definitions of what constituted arousal. And it is shocking, to say the least. It is something that
Demonic.
any modern man or any traditional man then, if you knew this was going on, he would have got killed doing this. And he should have, but instead we get a statue of him at we get a bronze statue at the University of Indiana for him. So
Wow.
sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but
No, that's good stuff. It's just, I think some people I alluded to earlier that are so busy trying to put food on the table and pay the taxes and get their kids to soccer, and they're doing what they think they should be, but they're so busy they're not seeing that the ship is sinking around them.
so this leads me to a next question that, on the political side of things. My dad always said half the battle is showing up. So a lot of people have this pessimistic view about getting involved into politics and what they can do. Is it not the truth? Just by getting active in some kind of aspect, it does help. It does help getting involved because half the battle is showing up, and Republican voters traditionally, or I don't know if it's traditional, I'm still pretty young, I guess, but they don't show up to vote. They don't show up to participate. When you don't participate, well, guess who does? Guess who is participating actively? So can you speak to that a little bit about being active and participating in the process instead of just complaining that my vote doesn't matter?
Sure, absolutely. I think your dad's spot on. Well, he was spot on when he said that. There's always a vacuum. We were talking. I was in a prison unit last night talking to some men, and we were talking about, like, is America going to fall, and when, and how, and if, and all those different kind of discussions. Well, just kind of a segue story. We were talking about it, and I said the problem is if America does fall, and I know people say that's ludicrous, but everything in the history of humanity has fallen. Who'd have thought the USSR was going to fall?
Oh.
You know, Rome. Who'd have thought Rome? I mean, it doesn't matter. There's a day that America will no longer be America. And anyway, but I said when that happens, who's going to fill that void? That power is going to be filled by somebody, and it's going to be honorable men, or it's going to be dishonorable men. Going to you were saying earlier about all these post-apocalyptic shows, which you can't get enough of them. Not you, but I mean society.
Oh yeah,
If there's
we eat it up.
Apocalyptic show, we watch it, and you see this whole genre of film that's exploded in popularity. The Last of Us, literally, like you were saying, The Last of Us, and so many of those shows. What was the one with Kevin Costner years ago with The Postman?
Oh yeah,
The Postman, and that you started seeing those shows coming. Now they're like all the time. But I have held very strongly. People a lot of times say, "How can you be a pastor and be so involved in politics?" And when I was on the school board, I remember several times. One lady in particular, she just, in the citizen participation, pointed right at me and said, "You keep your God out of politics. There's no room in this school for your God. We don't want him here. Nobody wants him here. We don't want to hear from him." And I thought, how bizarre, right here in Conroe, Texas,
What?
to have somebody so vehemently angry at God. Of course, she had, I think, purple hair, or no, it was like a blue.
Usually it's a nose ring. That's usually
the nose ring and the blue
Bluish
hair or the green
hue.
hair is a dead giveaway to me.
It was a bluish.
in Conroe, Texas.
Right here in Conroe, we don't want your God in this school at all. And now you see the fight with the 10 Commandments. And even 2 of our school board members on Conroe ISD with the cold feet saying, well, I don't know. What about other people? What about Muslims? What about atheists? What about? I don't care what about.
Yeah, what about them? I
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah,
What
who
about
ca-
I'm
who
done.
cares?
Suck eggs.
Who cares?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
Well, you don't go into a Muslim home and say, "Hey, or a Muslim country and say, "Hey, man, we really need some."
There's a saying that says, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." And we spent a summer, we being my wife and my 2 daughters, in the Baikal Valley on the Syrian border with the Bedouins. And when we were there, I told my daughters, "You're gonna have to dress a certain way. You're gonna have to behave a certain way. There's things you're gonna have to do differently than our culture because we're in their culture.
Right.
We have to adapt to them." I also want to be very clear. I am done adapting. About 2 or 3 years ago, I said, "I'm done adapting. You adapt to me. I speak English. If you want to communicate with me, you need to learn English." I'm not changing my religion. I'm not changing my positions. I'm not adapting to you at all. You came
Folks,
here. You adapt to me.
This is not an unusual take. This is literally how most of, if not a majority of the countries operate across the planet.
Right.
From Poland to Argentina. I mean,
Mexico.
You can't go over there. We're the only country that says you don't have to assimilate to us. We can adapt to bring you in. That has not worked. We're seeing the fruits of that labor, and we can't go over there and do the same thing. Matter of fact, Christians are being slaughtered across the world. We covered that across the globe. We got people screaming "Free Palestine." These people don't care about innocents being slaughtered. It's selective outrage for whatever agenda they're trying to push. Because if you really cared, you'd be looking at all the other groups out there that are under persecution, that are actually experiencing genocide, and they're going through turmoil. But because it's Christian, we can't talk about it. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with what you just said, Dale. We don't need to adapt. Okay? This country's been built, and it's been constituted and structured by Christian founders. It's a Christian nation. There is no argument about it. That's what it is. We don't need to change because we've got a party that needs a demographic that puts them into power.
Exactly right. Even our national motto, I tell people, "E pluribus unum," out of many one. And when you look in the Bible in John 17, where Christ's actually high intercessory prayer for us is that we have unity as he and the Father are one, that his followers would be one. So when I see people come in and say we're no longer a melting pot, we're compartmentalized like a school lunch tray where you got corn here and this there, we're not a melting pot. It's every individual group. You no longer have an American culture, which I think on a much bigger thing, all these threads weaving together, get the man out of the house, give the woman a $500 check to throw him out so that he's not raising his children. He's replaced by the government, break down the family, men with men, women with women, completely destroy the nuclear family.
Import this conflicting culture.
Open borders, bring all cultures in, accept everybody as they are. And even I hear Christians sometimes like, well, in ancient Israel, the Jews, it says they had to help the sojourner and the stranger in their land. But what frustrates me with those Christians is, but it also goes on to say those foreigners could not bring in foreign gods. They had to become Jewish.
Bingo.
They were not allowed to bring their Baals and their Ashtoreth poles. And if they did, you eventually, always, 100% of the time, see Israel fall into decay. When they allowed other cultures to move in and didn't force them to adapt, Israel suffered. When they brought people in, they said, you either become Jewish, you go by our standards, or we will shun you and keep you out. The Samaritans were not allowed to go into Israel because they had pigs. So again, I even find Christians perverting the truth of God's word. I'm going to hope that they're just biblically illiterate and they're not willfully changing the words. Your question, though, about this power vacuum and what's going to happen, and I think it's important that all people have a solid basis in the Bible, number one, and a solid basis in the culture of their nation, number two. And the reason being, I've said this many times, I told Mark I'm trying to write about 3 different books right now. I'm thinking about putting it into like 3 different 100-page pamphlets because I never get that 500-page book done.
We'll find you a publisher.
We know a publisher.
You know a publisher?
We'll find you a publisher.
We got a good one.
But one of them was on the importance of religion and politics. And I'll say this, and this is an original thought of mine, and I'll share it on your broadcast now. When the disciples came and asked Jesus, what is the most important law? While they were trying to trip him up, and I'm not going into the context of that, there were different schools of thought on what was the most important. And what they were doing is, if you tell us what you think is the most important law, then we can cubbyhole you and do, oh, you're a Democrat or Republican or Libertarian, or you're a, they're trying to cubbyhole him into a school of thought. But his answer amazed them. If you read that, it says it amazed him because he wasn't going to be cubbyholed. But what he did say was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Now, they asked what was the most important law. They did not ask the second. So when I read scriptures, I'm focused on what is being done and why, and they didn't ask for the second. But if you know the story, Jesus says, and the second is like the first, but they didn't ask for the second. So what he's about to say, he determined was important enough to add to the discussion, not because they asked, but God determined this was important to know. And he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I have argued for about 5, 6, 7 years now, when people say, how can you be a Christian and in politics? Or how can you be a pastor and in politics? In the good sense of the word, the interaction mankind has with God, in the good sense of the word, is religion. What is our interaction with God? What is the word for interaction with our fellow man called? I call it politics. If I love my neighbor, I will want my neighbor to live under just laws. If I love my neighbor, I will want to end no-fault divorce in this state. If I love my neighbor, I want his children raised in a godly home with a man in it. If I love my neighbor, all these things that are scriptural, I want my neighbor to enjoy if I love my neighbor. So I think it's incumbent and a responsibility of Christians and godly men to take that role to say, no, my most important things are religion and politics. And what are the two things we've been taught most of our life never talk about?
Religion and politics.
And the same one that says, I don't want you talking about religion, is the same voice that says, I don't want you talking politics.
It's crazy that we're even having this conversation because who would not want, if you're a Christian, why would you not want to be governed by Christian-based law and scripture? I mean, this is basic stuff. Can't believe we're having to talk about, and maybe that's been by design. Maybe separating that it's been effective to say the least. But I can't imagine men 500 years ago were like, "Oh, I'm not gonna get involved in state matters. I'm a godly man." I just don't see that happening 500 years ago. I mean, there's been some incredible history to reference here. And that's pretty insane that you're
apathy has always been
that's been nuts.
The enemy of good, apathy and ignorance. And throughout history, I mean, I think we can probably find great examples of that throughout the Bible and in history, where people are just apathetic or they're ignorant or a combination of both. You mentioned e pluribus unum. A lot of people think that means out of many one. They're thinking that means out of many cultures come into. No, that's not what it means. It just means many people, but in the same culture.
Yeah,
America was never meant.
That's how they pervert it, man.
America was never meant to be what we're seeing.
It's a great
today.
example. It's a great.
They don't. You go down to Sugar Land and all you see are Hindu temples and all this stuff. Then you go into different parts of Houston, you see nothing but mosques, and that was never the founding. And yet you will hear so-called Christians today say, "Oh no, it's freedom of religion." The founders were, and I'd like for you to address this because this is a hot topic, Pastor. When they say the founders were all about freedom of religion, so Muslim, and it doesn't matter if you're Hindu or all these different religions that people, and I'm like, you guys are crazy. This is a Christian nation. I know not all the founders were Christians. I know that. We all understand that, but what they did all understand was the only way a free nation that could survive would be a moral and religious people. And when they said religious, they meant specifically Christian
and there was a lot of different denominations. I mean, there was a lot of different Christian groups.
No,
right?
there was different denominations.
But again,
it was Christian.
I don't think they imagined in Dearborn, Michigan, a 5 a.m. call to prayer. And look, it's not like we're sitting up here and just bashing these other religions. This is our home.
But they don't belong here.
This is our home.
They don't belong
You can point
here.
out things that aren't, we didn't invite this into our home. No. This has been foisted upon us. This has been coerced.
It doesn't.
And we've been shamed into this. We're even talking about it. Now we're like these bigoted type of people. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. But yeah, can you speak to that? Can you rephrase that? I'm sorry.
Yeah. The freedom of religion. People have perverted that today and make that sound like, oh yeah, we welcome in all these different religions and paganism and Hinduism and Buddhism and Muslim and all this stuff.
Satanism.
Baloney. No, we cannot survive as a people by accepting that within our borders and within it destroys our culture.
Mm-hmm.
What does a Christian say to that? Is that being anti-Christian?
No, not at all. When people say about our Constitution doesn't say anything about Christianity, there was 13 colonies that they were trying to get that Constitution. I believe 12 of them were Protestant, and in their state constitutions or their constitution of their colony, you had to take an affirmation.
That's right.
You had to
Oath that
sign
says,
an oath.
I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
Bingo.
I think one of the colonies was Catholic.
That was Maryland.
Yep. And so
Massachusetts. I'm sorry, Massachusetts.
And so the reason it didn't, it said a freedom of religion, was only for Protestant, or what we would call under the banner of Christendom,
Yes.
was a Christian. So we're not going to have a state-sponsored. I've argued again probably for 30 or 40 years now. The Constitution says the state shall not establish a religion. Christianity was established by Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. America can't establish Christianity because it's already been established. But it also goes on to say they can not limit my ability to practice my religion. Now, when I have never gone into a mosque or a Muslim, Islam, Hindu, whatever store and demanded they carry bacon. I would be a fool to do that. It'd be wrong to do that. But you see here a week or two ago in Houston,
Yes.
they went into that store.
That
and
imam
told the
was going
shop
around
owner,
down in Houston. Yes.
get rid of cigarettes, get rid of alcohol, get rid of bacon, or there's going to be trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Who in the world do they think they are to come to our country and start telling us what we can do in our own private businesses? And the whole thing, and I will say this again, I've probably spent 6 months or so in the Middle East, over Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the Iraqi border, those areas, those regions. I do not want to live like that. I absolutely do not want that coming here. And I had a friend of mine back in 2006, he's Muslim, in Lebanon. I was during the Israeli-Hezbollah war. I was in Lebanon during that war in 2006. And he said, you realize America's going to fall by us. And I said, well, why do you say that? He said, we have a three-pronged program. We send the very best and brightest and nice people that everyone gets along with their families. They get ingrained to the economic structure and fabric of a society. Then we start creating districts where Muslims or Muslim sympathetic people, Barack Obama, Ilhar Omar, Mandami now, they will get into those positions and change the law to accommodate us against you. Mm-hmm. What you said about Dearborn, I read an article that said they had to change their noise ordinances.
That's exactly right.
They changed their noise ordinance because they said if you're a Christian playing Christian music, you can have a certain amount of decibels, but for the Muslims, because their prayer call has to be louder, we're going to change the law to accommodate them. This was in 2006, this guy told me this. He said, this was coming to your country. Your laws will change to be complementary to us and not Christianity. And the third wave is we get violent and take over. And I said, do you really think you're going to win? He said, Islam started in one city, Medina, in 700 AD. We now have 57 of the 198 nations we have conquered. His word was conquered. And he said it's all through, not a single nation we take is through just peace. We end up conquering them through violence. So he said, you guys complain about a 20-year war. We've been at war for 1,400 years. We have a 1,000-year plan to destroy the West. We're going to keep sending people over to your country. You'll keep accepting them, and you will change your laws to accommodate us. Trust me, it's going to happen. That was in 2006.
And it's been facilitated. You can't sit here and deny what we're seeing. I mean, and the frustrating part is really when you talking to people who are talking about, oh, you can't bring God into school and all this. These are the same ones that have no problem bringing their gods. They don't look at it as their gods. But these ideologies with the pride flag, it's the same thing. So what they're arguing against, they're actually practicing themselves. Just another example of what they scream at you and accuse you of doing, they're actually doing themselves, is 9 times out of 10 what's going on. But that was, you said that was 2006 you were told that?
2006 in the Israeli-Hezbollah war. I was in Lebanon.
That is absolutely insane.
Saul Alinsky, his book Rules for Radicals, almost identical to what you just said. I don't know if you have read that or not, but the exact same thought. One of his tenets is you accuse the other side of what you're doing, because then when you're accused of it, it's, oh well, everyone does this, or that's just it's shrugged off if you've accused the other side first.
Path to normalization.
Yeah, he said you just accuse the other side of what you're about to do. Then when they accuse you of it, it's just tit for tat. You know, they're saying that because they're doing it, and the 80% of the public doesn't know what's going on. They just hear, oh, I guess they accuse them, and now he said, she said kind of thing. And it's interesting if you watch that, if you read the book Rules for Radicals. Mark, you may know this. I don't know if you do or not.
I read it. Yep.
Did you see who he
dedicated the book to Satan.
Bingo.
Yeah.
God.
In the opening thing, it says, I dedicate this book to Lucifer, the first radical that overthrew power.
Yep.
In the opening page, the dedication's to Lucifer.
Saul Alinsky.
And interestingly, Hillary Clinton, when she was running some years ago, there's a YouTube clip you can find. She said, one of my best books, one of my idols is Saul Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky, that's right.
Well, she was introduced to Saul when she was at college. Hillary Clinton started out as a Goldwater girl.
She got fired.
What do you mean?
When she was at Goldwater, but when she was at Watergate, she was an attorney.
No. I'm talking about she was a Goldwater girl in college. So she was a hyper conservative. She was raised in a very, very conservative home there in Arkansas. And when she was going to school, she was Barry Goldwater. She was a Goldwater girl. Then through her Methodist pastor was introduced to Saul Alinsky and was radicalized by Saul Alinsky. And she ended up doing her thesis in college on Saul Alinsky and going through, but she actually became a communist under the tutelage personally of Saul Alinsky. And he was an evil, wicked, wicked man. And Barack Obama, even though he wasn't personally mentored by Saul Alinsky was a heavy influence on Barack Obama. And but yeah, Saul had infiltrated into the church. And I find it very interesting. We can go back and find a lot of these communists, especially, and I don't know what it is about the Methodist Church, but the communists have very much infiltrated, and it's been through the feminist movement that it's happened. And through the feminization of the Protestant churches and stuff, but especially the Methodist and the other, anyway. But yeah, that's Presbyterian and also the Church of England. What is it?
Anglican.
The Anglican. And they've the communists have made a home there in these places, and you can see the feminist influence, the communist influence, and they get a hold of these young people, and next thing you know, they're radicalized, and they buy into it. And we have the Bill and Hillary Clintons, we have the Barack Obamas, and these are full-blown communists. And back in the 90s, when I was telling people they were communist, people gave me all kinds of crap for that because they thought I was being stupid and radical, and I was being, hyperbolic and all these things. I'm telling you, they're communists. And today, of course, what do we now know?
Now they say they're communists, and
they were always communists. But how my thing in all of this is, because there's plenty of talk radio, plenty of podcasts to talk about the problem. I'm not interested in identifying the problem anymore. If people don't know what the problem is, they don't want to know what the problem is. I'm interested in, what do we do about
solutions?
And the only way you can come up with solutions, you have to know the origins. And the origins of all this is the Communist Party. A lot of people don't realize, and you can go back and find, Lincoln was a big fan of communism. And he was also, he was well-read on communist doctrine in the very beginning, in the very early days. A lot of people don't know that. But our country took a sharp turn to the left right after the War of Northern Aggression. But feminism and the public education system was right there, right at the beginning. And that is what sent our country down a path that it's gotten worse and worse. And people are looking around going, how did we get here? And it's very, very simple. And, but people don't want to hear about the solutions because it's very uncomfortable. It's very unpopular. Guys don't want to mess with it because guys are going to sit there and go, I can't tell my wife any of this stuff. I'll never get laid again. But no, that's the reality. It's just, that's where we are as a culture today. And because of no fault divorce, men are scared to death of telling their wives to do anything because the wife will say, fine, I'll divorce you, get half of everything. I'll get the house, I'll get you half of your retirement.
And I'll marry the government.
And I'll marry the government. Well, what can a guy do? So my question is Dale, what do you see in the church? Do you see also this I mean, I've seen it from the music. You look at the songs that are sung in quote unquote praise and worship today that are, to me, very uncomfortable versus the hymns that I grew up singing. You know, where is the Onward Christian Soldiers, the Amazing Grace, you go back and you look at the old hymns and the words in those, very different. The songs today that are sung in most of these churches and stuff, very feminized, very feminist language, and turning God almost into this effeminate, I don't know how, daddy kissed the boo-boo thing instead of a masculine, strong God that demands certain things. I mean, where are we at here today with the church and how this interacts with politics and how we got here today with all this?
Yeah, I do tell a lot of pastors that I deal with. You've covered a lot of ground there. I will say what you were saying earlier about the Methodists and the Presbyterian. I'm not going to mention churches, and I'm not even going to say it was them. When I first came to the Woodlands Bible Church, it was a group that meets, I think, the first or second Wednesday of the month. And I right after Trump won, the first one I went to, we were hosting at the church, and this group of about 6 or 7 guys came in, and they were like, I think it was the Wednesday, the morning after the election. And I said, is everything okay? I mean, there's a lot of consternation. They said, what are we going to tell our people Sunday? I said, like a sermon? I mean, what are you talking about? It took me a while to click they were saying because of the election results. And these were pastors of churches here in the Woodlands that were just like, I just can't believe the pain our people are going to go through. I'm like, I'm ecstatic that Trump won. What do you mean pain? Now I will tell you.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they were like, what are we going to say?
And these are churches we would know.
Pastor, yep. No, not, they weren't, I won't say that they were necessarily they may call themselves evangelical.
Okay, no, I know what you're saying.
But these are not, you would know the name of the church, probably not the pastor's name. So if you
these
know
may be wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, but I was just kind of sitting there stunned as they went around the room just commiserating with, oh my goodness, we're going to have a message of encouragement and a message of love and of peace. And so back to your point, these milquetoasty pastors, I'm thinking, as Mark, I know you're very aware of the Black Robe Regiment.
Yes.
There's a book, a couple books there talking about that. I would encourage people to look at them. But there was a letter, and maybe you know about that letter that a guy wrote back to England and said, America's going to win this battle. And he said they won't win it because of the blue coats. That Black Robe Regiment, he said they're going to win it because of the Black Robed Regiment.
Yes.
He said the pastors on Sunday are preaching thunderous judgment from God, and they're preaching liberty, and they're preaching righteousness and holiness, and God will answer those prayers. And so he said, we're going to lose this war. Prior to the war being over, he said the Black Robe Regiment won the war, not the blue coats, but the Black Robe Regiment. Right. And I look at where pastors were then and how involved they were, and the famous story of the guy that Sunday morning took his robe off, and underneath it was
had his
Revolutionary War
muzzleloader.
Yeah. And you hear those stories, and then today you get people almost in tears over Trump won. What are we going to say? And I'm like, God, where have we fallen to as biblical, godly men?
They're not men.
No. As I was saying earlier about when they say about politics and religion, I say, Moses spoke to Pharaoh of Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world. He had an audience with Pharaoh. Jesus spoke directly to Pilate. Paul spoke to Caesar. All through the Bible, you see God's spokespeople speaking to government officials. Ultimately, it's some great cost to them in many cases, but nevertheless, this notion of God's spokespeople can't speak into the political realm is absolute a lie from the pits of hell. All through the Bible, you see those evidences of godly men speaking to the political leadership of their day in very uncertain terms or very straightforward terms of what God expects from them. So I don't like when people say that as a pastor you can't be involved in politics. I think even some of the elect, those that are saved, have been blinded by the God of this world, and they can't see the truth of the importance. I'll also say there's three human institutions God's created. The family, where he made them male and female. That's the word singular, like we would say in English today, man and woman, not men and women. He made them man and woman and blessed them. The only marital union blessed by God is the union of one man with one woman. There's no other union that's blessed by God. So the one institution he created was the family. The next institution he instituted was government, and the third institution was the church. And I tell people, how foolish would it be to think that God doesn't want his people involved in all three of those institutions? He absolutely wants them involved in those institutions.
Yeah, and a deception by design. I mean, that's just a way to neutralize enemies, is telling them not to get involved in things like this. So this is, I agree with you. Straight out of the pits of hell. Thank you, folks, for tuning into the Defiance Daily Show. We're here with Pastor Dale Inman. Dale, why don't you give us some closing words of encouragement and some final thoughts before we end the show today?
Well, the encouragement is, Sunday I misspoke and I corrected myself in my sermon. I said, God is going to win. I would encourage people to realize God already won. When the tomb opened up and he stepped out from the grave, the battle is over. We're doing like cleanup right now. So stay encouraged. There's two verses in the Bible that have really weighed on me these last several months, Galatians 6, 9, and 10, that says, do not grow weary in doing good. I've used that verse in counseling probably a dozen times in the last 3 or 4 months, where people that are doing good get weary. And again, why did God have to tell us that? The world knows no good deed goes unpunished. That's the world standard. They know that. So I say we need the encouragement to do not grow weary, because doing good causes weariness. It gets you down. It's hard to get up every morning and say, I'm going to face the demons and face a human secular society, and I'm going to champion godly principles, and it will wear you down physically. You've got to be aware of that. So I encourage people, do not grow weary in doing good. And the encouragement part comes, the next verse, part of that verse says, because in due time or at the right season that God predicts, God chooses, you will reap. As we've been saying, we're reaping the calamity of satanic principles. If we sow biblical, godly principles, there's also a harvest that comes from that. So don't grow weary, because what your eyes and your ears tell you and your own brain tells you, trust in the Lord that in due season you will reap if you do not falter or faint along the way. And then the next verse, Galatians 6:10 says, as you have opportunity, I get that not everyone has opportunity, but as you do have opportunity, do good to all people, especially those of the household of faith. So if you see that downtrodden person or someone struggling, or trying to help them as you're able. Not everyone can give cars away to people or pay their bills, but if you can give a word of encouragement or tell them, hey, let me come alongside of you and pray for you and lift your spirits a little bit, or as you're able, whatever opportunity you have, whatever God's blessed you with, whatever comfort you've received from the Lord, use that to help or comfort or encourage a brother or sister in Christ. Do it to anyone, but especially a brother or sister in Christ. That would be my closing words of encouragement. And don't grow weary in doing well.
Amen.
Awesome message. Thank you so much, Dale, for joining us here at the Defiance Daily Show. We'll bid you adieu. God bless you all.
Thank you, guys.
Stay reliable.
God bless. Thank you, Dale.